Hey, so I wanted to jump on here and tell you all that my husband Bill and I are celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary in May. And I was thinking about that age old question of, what's the secret to your long marriage? Or what's the secret to marriage in general? That couples who've been married a long time get asked. And then I remembered we had dinner with friends of ours recently, and a friend of mine suggested, or basically asked me to talk more about Bill and me. She knows us very well, obviously. And she knows that I'm pretty open about things and that other people aren't necessarily. And it's really helpful to hear about us. So I thought I'd take a moment and just do that. Um, so here's how I'd basically answer that question. And of course, I can only answer it from my perspective, but I do believe that it can be applied to pretty much any one or any marriage. I I absolutely believe that for us, what has made it work is having a common goal and belief system. And I know I've said this over and over about being a team, but being on the same team ultimately, pitching for the same team. There are so many things that are going to come up in your life when you've been married a long time that could potentially do it in. I mean, let's face it. Life is life whether you're married or not, and life is hard. If you don't have something binding you that is just a long-term goal, I guess you'd put it. And for some people, it might just be marriage itself, just simply staying married. I know that that is certainly partly true for us. Then it's harder to get through those really hard times. Um, because today we're both very secure in our marriage, but it wasn't always this way. And in 2017, I wrote a book called The Alpha Female's Guide to Men in Marriage because I had been frustrated with what I felt was a power struggle between my husband and me for a long time. And it came in the form of bickering over little things. But of course, it's never about the things themselves, as we all know. And that was our story. And we both wanted that to stop, to end. Now, other couples do a different dance. Some people just don't ever address conflict. They just avoid it, which means their houses are quieter, but they're not resolving anything either. So that's not the solution either. We just always dove into the conflict because I think mainly because we were trying to find new ways to resolve things. We just really felt that there's always a solution. And I'd say that no matter what, that's probably what we have in common. Of all the things we don't have in common, and I'm going to mention a few of those, that's one that we do is perseverance and just the refusal to give up and to have this goal of wanting to stay married. And plus, we have a great family and super kids, and why would we ever blow that up? In fact, I think for a lot of, I think children, just the existence of children was really why, it's really what marriage was about. I mean, even today, I think, though it's falling out of flavor, people get married when they're ready to have children because they know instinctively that that's the right way to do it. That's the best way to do it. And those children are are binding. They make you attached to that person that you're married to forever. And sometimes it's a good enough reason to just stay married. I mean, not in a bad marriage, not to be miserable, and that's good, but it could be the impetus for forcing you to work things out. That's what I mean. Um, I don't know. I'm convinced that had we not been married, and I've heard other people say this too, so I know it's super common, but you don't hear it very often. I'm not sure we would have had the motivation that we needed to make the changes to recover from different problems we've had. It's because we were married that we became very intentional about our life, both as a couple and as parents, So the result is that we did make it work. If that piece hadn't been there, if we were just dating, I don't know that we'd be excuse me, I don't know that we'd still be married. I don't know. All relationships struggle. There's not just months, but sometimes years when your marriage may feel like it's not even working at all, and that's okay. That's normal. That doesn't mean that you married the wrong person. If you're married to somebody for decades, how can you not experience this? I mean, that's just called life. And when you're married, you're still experiencing life, right? So I thought I'd just tell you a few differences between Bill and me, that some of you may identify with, or maybe you have different. I'm sure you do have different differences. But anyway, these are things that have caused serious problems for us. Not so much serious problems, but daily difficulties. And sometimes the daily stuff can be harder to contend with in the end than the big items, So there are several ways that he and I are very, very different. He is extraordinarily slow to make a decision. Except he likes to laugh, except when he asked me to marry him, which was 6 months in. That was about his fastest decision ever in his life. And I think he thinks that turned out pretty well. But for some reason, that's the only thing I can think of that he ever did rather quickly. He will overturn every stone. He will take it out. He's a big picture thinker. So he will overturn every stone and think all the way out to the very end and think about everything that could possibly happen that can go wrong, to the point where I wouldn't say he develops inertia, because he absolutely makes a decision in the end. He doesn't just stay stuck ever. But it does take an extremely long time. Meanwhile, I am the exact opposite. I get an idea and that's it. It's done. It's not, in my opinion, it's not impetuous. It's very, very calculated, which people don't realize, or he doesn't realize, because I've usually spent a lot of time mulling it in my head first. And then I'm presented with an opportunity, let's say, to do it. And I do it. It's not like, oh, I just got this whim last night. Wouldn't this be fun? And then just do it. It's not that. It's just that I'm very fast and it's very calculated. I have to throw that in there again to defend myself, because I don't think it's a bad quality. I honestly don't. And I don't think his is bad. I think they're just different, extremely different. And you can imagine how, when it comes to making life decisions, this would be somewhat problematic. So we've had to mull through that. And we'll continue to, because he'll always be that way and I'll always be my way. We just have to compromise. Those are our natural ways. Another one is that I am an obsessive planner and he's somewhat last minute. Or actually, I would say he's just not really a planner. In general, I wouldn't say that he's so last minute, but I am an obsessive planner. So anybody next to me is going to seem different. So he likes to make a joke that I'm, planning out what's going to be said at our funerals and all of that. So I am very much an obsessive planner, and he is not. So let's just leave it at that and say, you can again see how that could be really problematic on a daily basis. And then I think I mentioned this before, but he's a big picture person and I'm a details oriented person. So he just wants to talk about, the bigger picture and planning for big things. And I'm going to get right down to the nitty gritty of, no matter what it is, how is this going to look? What's it going to look like? If we're talking about money, I want, really specific on the numbers. He'll just be like roundabout, that kind of thing. So that's also something we've had to muddle through. So those are the biggest differences I could come up with. And then the biggest issue ongoing for many years, which is now ended, is our working from home. And I think I talked about that in the last episode or a previous episode recently. That's been our number one biggest thing. There's just no question about it. And It went on for many, many, many years, and we had to come up with all sorts of temporary solutions for it, but it has never been ideal, and I do not recommend it. But as I said in that last episode, I do think that we're headed that way, or couples are headed that way in the future. So I am concerned about it, because when I think about the number of hours spent on the conflict that ensues from that, it's pretty overwhelming. I mean, sometimes I think it is surprising that we're still married just for that alone. And that's not anything either one of us did. I think that's what kept us, again, thinking team, team spirit here. He didn't do anything wrong by working at home, and I didn't do anything wrong. This is the choice we made, and we worked with it, because by that time we were fully in it. It would be very hard to do it otherwise. And we tried mostly to keep it, again, like I said, on the table, and not personal. It was difficult. It was difficult. And yeah, that's been our biggest thing. But at the end of the day, what makes marriage is that you can't leave. That's the whole point. And if you have that belief system in place and you have a shared vision for the future, it's going to help you negotiate those difficult times. Marriage isn't a panacea, but it does stack the odds in your favor, especially when children are involved, just by having that in place. And it really doesn't matter what the details are of what you deal with in your marriage, or my neighbor does, or my friends do, or what we do. Everyone's got their stuff. Everybody. There's nobody who doesn't. And I do remember hearing somebody once asked, what's the secret to your long marriage? They were, like a really old couple. And they're like, don't get divorced. And I had to laugh, because that's kind of what I'm saying. I'm saying, if nobody has one foot out the door, you'd be surprised at what you can just manage to deal with. And things look different a year or two later than they did before. And if you leave, you don't have the opportunity to see if that's going to work itself out. So, anyway, there's a lot more to marriage than what I'm talking about. There's a lot of ugly stuff and things that are much more serious than what we've had to deal with. So I understand that. But I just, if I were asked, how did you get to 25 years? That's really, that would be how I'd answer it. And I think, I suspect that a lot of people would answer it in that same way. So that's it. I just wanted to jump on here and get a little personal, and hope that it's helpful in any way that it may be. See you next time.